Welcome back, horror fans, to the Weird Kid Horror Show. I am your host, the Weird Kid. Today, I am going to show you how you can make your very own Mad Scientist Contraption. You can use it for Halloween, or if you're weird like me, a year-round prop decoration. Check it out. Hey guys, welcome to the first ever Weird Kid Show how-to video, where today I'm going to show you how to make your own Mad Scientist Contraption, or at least show you how I made a Mad Scientist Contraption. Now right off the bat you're going to say, but DJ, you're using real insulators. How am I supposed to get insulators? Well, I lucked out. I found some abandoned on the side of the road after the power company had gone through and replaced poles. But I understand they're not easily found. An alternative, corrugated looking toilet plungers. That's right, a toilet plunger. And if you look at them, they're really cool because they're corrugated on the bottom like a insulator. But then it has a long stem with a round ball at the end of it, which is really cool because you could either cut that off and put on a ping pong ball that you paint black and dry brush copper to make it look like a conductor, or you can just leave it on there and paint it copper to look like a conductor. You could even have like coiled wires coming out of it and everything else. But anyways, they're super cheap and super light, so that's a good alternative. Step one was using some scrap wood that I had lying around. I made mine 2.5 feet tall by 2 feet wide, and I cut all four sides and then screwed it together with some wood screws, and then I cut up the extra wood to cover the entire top to have the control panel surface. So now that my box was together, I could start to really work and assemble this thing. I chose to work on the top first. I took the insulators and I measured it out to make sure that they were somewhat even, and with a paddle bit, as you can see on the drill, I drilled holes so that the threads that are attached to the bottom of the insulators could just slip in through the holes. They were heavy enough and snug enough to where I didn't have to like permanently attach them. That way I can take them out when I want to move it, and they weren't gonna go anywhere. After that, I took a plasma ball, which I had bought at Walmart for under 20 bucks, and I had centered it on the top, and then I traced around it. You could technically glue it to the top if you wanted to. I wanted to kind of recess it into the box to make it look like it was part of the contraption, that it was coming from up inside. I chose to cut around it so that I could snug it down inside a little bit. Once I traced out the base of the plasma ball, I took the paddle bit and drilled a pilot hole so that I could take my saw and cut out that section. Once that was done, I could start gathering all the parts and pieces I needed to start assembling this thing. I had managed to get some electrical gauges off of eBay. If you look, you can get lots, like 4 or 5 for one lower price than if you were to buy one. I picked out a few different kinds to use on this. If you can't find electrical gauges, use what you can. Go to Walmart and go into the bike section or the automotive section and look for pressure gauges. Usually you can get small ones for pretty cheap. Look at different components that people throw away on the side of the road, stereo systems or anything that has knobs and buttons. You can find old toggle switches. Whatever you can find and scrounge, just use your imagination. There is no wrong way. So apart from the plasma ball, I wanted another feature. I wanted a bubbler where it appears like there's some kind of a compound being made or some kind of an element. Maybe that's what this machine is doing, is it's processing and making this agent or element or compound, whatever it is that's going on there. Walmart has these bottles and they're only 98 cents a piece. They have all kinds of different colors: purple, green, clear, and charcoal, and they're super cheap and they come in super handy. And they have a metal top and a bottom, which the top screws off obviously, but the bottom can also slip off, which comes in handy as well. So I bought a couple of those, and then the next step that I had to do was to cut a hole in the front so that I could put them in the back so that you could see them through the front. And in order to support that, I needed to take a piece of wood and screw it into the back so that it had something you could firmly secure it to in the back. After meticulously figuring out where I want to set all my components into the control panel, I took each piece and I put them face down onto the panel itself and then traced around it. This is where you need to cut your hole to recess it into the panel. The outside line is just a reference though, because each piece has a lip on it, if you will, that sits on the top of the panel. So we don't want to cut around that tracing line. We want to cut within 1/4 of an inch inside of the tracing to leave some material to be able to set the component, gauge, whatever that you're setting in there, so that you'll be able to fit it in snug. So one thing that I had was this I guess it's like a vacuum gauge, and there really was not much of a lip on it, so I ended up cutting it just within the line to try to get it fit in snug. However, it was too loose and was moving around, so I had to take some wood and attach it and screw it in from the back so that it had some kind of a frame around it that I was able to use some epoxy resin to glue it into place, basically. With that done, I was finally able to move on to the toggle switches. Now, toggle switches are designed to go onto very thin control panels. You're supposed to drill a hole, you put the thread in through where the toggle switch side comes out, and then you're able to screw a nut over the top of that. However, this is thick wood, so I'm unable to do that. So what I had to do was to drill a hole, trace out the toggle switch, and then cut around so that I could fit the toggle switch into the wood, which is cheating, I know. But then with the cover that goes on top, I'm still able to put the nut on, and you can't tell the difference, especially what we do to hide up any flaws afterwards. So at this point, my contraption is starting to take shape. With all the gauges and voltage meters and all my components glued into the front of the panel, then I can start moving on to some more finer details. So at this point in time, I dry fitted everything, put the insulators on, put the plasma ball in the position I wanted it to be, but I wanted to add some more elements. I found this black hose and these caps. I'm not quite sure where they came from, but you can use even soda bottle caps if you want. As long as you paint them and dry brush them, maybe alter them a little bit, you can use anything. Like I said, and I will continue to say, there is no wrong way. Anyways, I went and took these caps and I measured them out, and I JB welded them to the top and to the plasma ball to serve as connection points. Once the JB weld was dry, I was able to fit the hose on there. They are not glued. They don't need to be. They just slip on and off, and there's enough tension to keep them in place. So the next thing I did was to work on the bubble system, the bottles. As I stated previously, the metal bottom will slide off. It might have a little bit of resistance, but if you work it, it'll pop off. After dry fitting them to get the correct position, I took the caps off, and then I drilled a hole and screwed it to the wooden base that I had attached earlier so that it makes a permanent resting place for the bottles to slide into. The next thing I wanted to do was to add my light source, which I wanted to come from above and permeate down into the bottles. For that, I used this headlamp that I found, and I cut off the elastic headband portion of it, and then as you can see in the photos, I have a little nipple that's sticking out from behind one of the pressure gauges. I was able to zip tie it to that. After that, I looked at the front of this thing and realized that there was light permeating through the cracks of the bottles. You could see what was behind it, and I didn't want that. So then I took some black material and draped it over everything, and stapled it in place. And then the final thing I did to keep the curtain and everything snug was to cut some Velcro strips, staple that in there so that I could Velcro everything together and keep everything in place. Before I started getting into the detail though, one thing I did real quickly was to drill a hole near the back of the plasma ball so that I could fit the power cord up through. Hey, what do you know, it's finally starting to look like something. But now we're going to get into the fun part, the details. One of the first things I do is to use these sheets of craft foam. You can pretty much get them anywhere where they have a craft section. I get mine at Walmart, and it's pretty cheap. They come in a pack of, I think, 2 or 3, and it's going to come in handy throughout this project. The first thing I did was to cut it into 2.5-inch strips, but you can cut it in any size that suits your project. I kind of wish I'd used an epoxy, but I didn't have it at the time, and I wasn't going to take the time to mix up some JB Weld to put on this thing, so I just used regular Elmer's glue. I then bought some packages of upholstery tacks. I did get 2 kinds because I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use, but I ended up using all of them, and it didn't matter when I painted it at the end anyways, you couldn't tell. But these serve as like a rivet, if you will, to go along all the edges. It almost looks like there's been a metal edge put on and it's been riveted into the contraption. Once it's painted, it's super effective. After I put all the edges on, I then cut a strip of the craft foam, cut holes in it, and fit it over the toggle switches. And then I was able to screw down the nut with the little on-off switch plate. And then I was able to go in behind and put some rivets to tie it all in together. Alright, it's at this point in time that I start to get super excited because the main contraption is put together, all the elements are there. Of course, any kind of Halloween haunt or prop, you gotta have some kind of lighting. I ended up picking up a bunch of these Halloween string lights that are battery powered at the dollar store. When you see them, grab a bunch of them. They're great, you can do a lot with them. I picked up some white ones, and then I picked up the purple ones, and I went ahead and start drilling holes so that I can start sticking the wires and the little bulbs in little places, hiding them all over the place to start illuminating these gauges. After finishing the lighting, I focused on finishing the bubbler. I had this old fish tank pump sitting around. You can find them in the pet section of Walmart. They're reasonably cheap. I picked up some fish tank hose, a fish tank splitter, 2 fish tank bubblers. They're the little connectors that go at the end of the hose. I then drilled a hole in the top of the bottle caps so that I could run the hose down and through. Unscrewing the caps, I ran the hose through and then connected the bubbler on the end of the hoses. And then I filled them up with water, tied everything in together, and then I plugged in the fish tank pump to check to see if it worked, and it does. And it looks pretty cool if you ask me. Now that I was finished with the bubbler, it was time to trick this thing out. And I went ahead and I cut some more of that craft foam and made borders around where the bubbler was and added rivets. And I added some craft foam around the vacuum gauge that I have underneath the toggle switches with some added rivets just to make it pop a little bit more. Then once everything was finished and I was happy with how everything looked, then it was time to paint. So I took some black acrylic paint and I completely coated the entire thing. Once that was given a chance to dry, I took some of the black paint and I mixed in a little bit of white to give it a charcoal color, not too light and not too dark, and then I did a dry brush over the entire thing. Now I know there's a lot of YouTube videos on how to dry brush, but if you want me to show you how I dry brush, please post a comment down below asking me to do a how-to on dry brushing. At this point in time, you could just stop there. If you like the way it looks, then stop. Me, I like to go a step further and make it look decrepit and nasty and rusty. After all, it's a mad scientist laboratory, and whatever they do probably doesn't entail good hygiene. So the last thing I did was I picked up this color from folk art called Pueblo. To me, it looked like a rust. So very gently, I did the dry brush technique and went and covered all these areas, like the recessed areas, edges, and just kind of made this thing really grimy, decayed, and decrepit. And with that, I was done. And I was really happy with the finished product. And I hope you like it too. And I would really love to see if you guys make your own Mad Scientist contraption and share the photos with me. I would really love to see what you come up with. If you enjoyed this tutorial, let me know down in the comments. I'm more than happy to do more. I've done other Mad Scientist contraptions. I enjoyed doing them and would be more than happy to do more. So please comment down below and let me know and share with me what you come up with. Welcome back, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And remember, you can make your Mad Scientist contraption out of almost anything. There are no rules. There's no wrong way. You can make it with any part. I guess that works okay.
Damn it, DJ, you blew the fuse. Now I can't watch the Matlock Marathon anymore.